Okay, welcome everybody. I'd like to welcome the members of the KLM Foundation, Kavanah Lemitzvahs, and the listeners of Yiboneh. Rabbi Wegbreit is going to address us in a minute with a brief hesped for the late Rav Chaim Kanievsky, with a few practical applications and a practical approach for us all. So you should have in mind in this brief shir, there should be Leah Nishmas for, I'll give you his name, it's Rav Shmiriyahu Yosef Chaim ben Yaakov Israel. Rabbi Wegbreit, you can join us when you're ready. Thanks.
Thank you, Peretz. Rav Chaim Kanievsky, Zichron Tzaddik Kadosh L'Bracha, did so much for all of us. And I'm including anyone who's listening to this shir or is going to listen to this class. He did so much for all of us. First of all, practically every observant, Torah observant person I know has at one time requested from this great, great man. I'd like to refer to him, and this is from observation and a lot of hearing of credible, great people themselves, that we had the privilege to see a malach an angel in human garb. That's what he was, if you will. Now, so I know many people who either received a blessing from him for all sorts of things, barren people can't have children, illness, of course. We constantly in the yeshiva sent him requests for the healing of people in very difficult situations. People got blessings. He prayed for people, and he gave such, let's put it, sagely advice to so many people. So there are many direct recipients and benefactors of Rav Chaim. But I want to suggest, based on the Talmud and other sources, that a person like this is so aligned with Hashem, the Creator's intentions for mankind. He is so much, if you will, bringing pleasure and joy to the Creator of the world, that the entire world is a recipient, was a recipient, which is so tragic that I have to say was. Everyone was a recipient of the blessing that came into the world in his merit, of the protection from harm that came into the world in his merit. So I think tonight it's time to reciprocate as best as we can. Let's give back to the one who gave so much to all of us. And that's what we'll do right now. Is I want to discuss the mitzvahs involved in listening to this discussion, to this shir, to this hesped / eulogy. What are the mitzvahs involved? And also, what mitzvahs are involved if we improve ourselves as a result of this man, of discovery of this man's contribution to the world. So, as you all know, those who have been involved with KLM, either through Yiboneh or the KLM Foundation, we are focusing on something. The whole world, much of the world has begun to recognize the value of mindfulness, of being aware of what's taking place in the moment. It's as I've mentioned, it's even being taught in business schools. They're realizing that a manager's success is not just based on making good moves, but actually being aware of his own behavior and being conscious of what he's doing, right? It's a very wonderful development because it can improve character, etc. There's a lot to be said for this focus on being aware of what's taking place. When it comes to the Torah and mitzvahs, it goes to another dimension that's just unbelievable. When we become aware of the mitzvah we're about to do, besides, we actually remember a mitzvah means that something that Hashem, the creator, has told us to do. So when we become aware and align our intentions to do it before we do it, for sure we get a bond with Hashem. But it creates so much merit, so much more merit than just doing the mitzvahs unconsciously. So that's what we want to do. This is a way by us having forethought and intention in this moment while listening to this. We are bringing merit to Rev Shmaryahu Yosef Chaim ben Yaakov Yisrael. And we must begin like this, and that is that any time is a very important principle. Anytime you do a mitzvah, mitzvahs can have great fruits for many people, yourself and others. But we always, our initial intention in doing a mitzvah is to fulfill the will of our Creator, l'kayim mitzvahs bori. And then we can tack on, may, in the merit of this, may it heal this person and may help this person. So let's begin that way. Have in mind that the mitzvahs we are doing tonight are primarily to fulfill the intentions of our Creator and also for the Ilui Nishmas of Reb Chaim. Let's get started. We're going to begin with the mitzvah of learning Torah. Have in mind you're doing the mitzvah of learning Torah. Number one, because we will bring Torah principles into this eulogy. Number one. But when a Torah scholar and of such great proportions and a tzaddik, a righteous man of such great proportion passes away, the eulogy, the hesped, takes on another level. There are even more mitzvahs involved. And I want to focus on that, not general mitzvahs of a hesped. And so let's discuss what the first one I want to discuss is, and you should have this in mind immediately, and that is Yira es Hashem Elokecha. Fear Hashem your God. Now, people don't always are not always aware of the fact that Yira is not just fear of consequences. It includes the mitzvah of reverence, having reverence and intense respect and awe for Hashem. Now, Rabbi Akiva taught us that the verse says, Es Hashem Elokecha, Tira Es, fear, and there's this little I don't even know a conjunction, preposition in the word. Rabbi Akiva says that includes Torah scholars. So by honoring him, during the week of his shiva, by listening to by attending, listening to discussions of his greatness, you are showing respect to Hashem through your respect for this great Torah scholar. You're showing reverence and respect. So have that in mind for this beloved man that has left us. That's number one. Number two, by gathering together and speaking of this man's dedication and purity and kindness. So what we are doing is making a kiddush Hashem. We're sanctifying, we're making Hashem look good by seeing what a person can accomplish and the relationship they can achieve. So that's Kiddush Hashem. And also Avos Hashem, you're showing your love. When people get a higher view of what a Torah scholar is and who he is and what he does, and it's a positive one, you're making Hashem look good and you're showing you love Hashem, okay? It brings him so much, if you will, joy. So that's the second mitzvah. So, by the way, in our ensuing classes in KLM, I intend to not overwhelm you with the universe of mitzvahs that are often involved with single actions. I tend to break them down one by one. That's what I'm bleeding at or intending to do. But tonight, again, all you have to do is follow along with me and have that intention. I want to create a list of these mitzvahs. And of course, if you're interested in a written copy of the mitzvahs involved, please email me. So let's continue. So we have Yiras Hashem in terms of reverence and respect. We have Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying Hashem, and loving Hashem. And now, when we listen to this, okay, and we have in mind elevating his soul, Ilya Nishmas, by attending to this, by doing these mitzvahs, but most importantly, by letting him be the catalyst of our improving ourselves, that's called kindness, chesed, but it's a special chesed, chesed shel emes, which is true kindness, which means when you give to another person, you do something for them and they can't reciprocate. So now that Rav Chaim is in the next world, he cannot reciprocate to the kindness we're doing for him in any material way. So we are doing that. So have in mind the mitzvah of kindness and the mitzvah of emulating Hashem's divine qualities, because Hashem is showering us with kindness and we cannot truly reciprocate. Okay? Those are the mitzvahs we're doing. I'm going to review one more time, have them in mind, and then I want to tell you just a couple brief stories. So, first of all, we are showing reverence for Hashem himself by revering the Torah scholar. Secondly, we're both sanctifying and showing love of Hashem by this discussion. And we're doing kindness for the departed, the highest level of kindness, which is a pure kindness where you're not trying to receive anything in return. Now for the Hesped, now that we've done this, okay? So the first thing I want to share with you, I need to give you backdrop, of course. The average person, it takes them, the Daf Yomi, it takes them 7 years to go through the Talmud. Now, there's two sets of Talmud. There's the Talmud Bavli and the Talmud Yerushalmi, which is also very long. The Talmud Yerushalmi is learned by fewer people. Rev Chaim went through both of these, 7-year projects every year in a single year. He learned all the revealed parts of the Torah, the hidden parts of the Torah, the midrashim, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so he, needless to say, he was incredibly knowledgeable in Torah. And when he finished those, I'm not even getting to his public service. When he finished that regular learning schedule, then he wrote books about very sophisticated and subtle and complicated things. Okay, so we're talking about someone on a great level. Let's add to this that people, great Torah scholars, would wait in line, would go to Bnei Brak, sometimes fly to Eretz Yisrael and Bnei Brak, and wait in line to ask them their questions. Okay. So with that in mind, Rev Reuvan from Kehilas Bnei Israel in Har Nov told the following story. He said like this: Rev Chaim was trying to work out very subtle, difficult aspects of a mitzvah called Kiddush HaChodesh, sanctifying the moon. And someone told him that there was a Avreich, a married Torah scholar who'd written a book about this mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. He lived in Kiryat Sefer, which is, I'm going to say, I'm guessing an hour away by bus or even by car. It's a drive. It's a drive. So Rav Chaim says, I want to drive to this rabbi and discuss this mitzvah with him. the shamish, his assistant, looks at him and he goes, "Are you kidding? He said, you're the greatest Torah scholar in the world. He should come to you. Just invite him to come see you. We'll be very flattered." So he says, "No." "No, I'm going to go to him." So Rav Chaim finds out where he lives, and he knocks. Imagine the greatest Torah scholar in the world knocking on your door. So knocks on his door, and his wife says, "Well, he's not. He's in the kollel. He's studying. He's not in the house." So what happens? He goes from the house to the kollel to consult with him and discuss this. In one word, unspeakable humility. Do you hear this? He traveled to him. If you know the context, that's just absolutely unbelievable. So, lesson number one is it's very similar to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest Torah scholar of all time, greatest prophet of all time, yet he was known to be incredibly humble. So it says in Perkei Avos, Ezuhu Chacham, who is a wise person? And the Tiferes Yisrael explains, it's not saying who the answer isn't the guy who knows the most, right? It's one willing to learn from anyone, even someone who is not as wise as you are, right? So the question is, do you want to look wise or be wise? So how about this? Let's emulate Rav Chaim and go ahead. Everyone loves discussing the Parsha. I'm just giving you one example. Everyone loves discussing it. How about this? Ask one of your children, ask someone who you maybe has studied less Torah than you, ask them what they think about it, right? We can immediately implement that. So if you do that, you're doing great kindness, okay? The second story I want to tell you is, this will probably be the last one. The second story is like this. Thank God I have a little bit of protexia in terms of Rav Chaim. I discovered about 8-10 years ago that my grandfather's first cousin married into the Hazan Ish's family, the great Hazan Ish. And so did Rav Chaim's, his father married in there. So I found out I had this nice big family of very distinguished people in Bnei Brak. One of them he's now the mayor of Bnei Brak, or Rav Rubinstein. So he was the liaison and secretary for all the great Torah scholars there. And so there's usually people would take advantage during the holidays of Pesach and Sukkot in the intermediate days. They would line up to get blessings and, again, all sorts of goodness from Rav Chaim. So my relative, the mayor, so my son wanted to see Rav Chaim, and that was a great trip to take. So we went to see Rav Chaim, but he wanted to do a kindness to us, this Rav Rubinstein. So he didn't put us in that line that everyone waited for, right? Which I've waited in, more than once. He actually took us into the house, into this room where Rav Chaim learns Torah. And he decides he knocks on the door and he comes in, myself, this rabbi, and my son. And we walk into the room, and I want to describe what it looked like. So Rav Chaim, it has a huge laminated copy of the Mishnayos, and I hope I can adjust the camera so you can see this, but he basically, I'll try to raise it up. He's like this. Yeah, I think he had his glasses off too. He's like this. And we had walked into the room. The door opens, there's a sound. People walked into the room, and for a couple minutes, we just stood there, and he had no idea it was anybody else in the room. He was so completely immersed in his study, completely connected, that he didn't even know we were there. And then Rav Reuven says, "Excuse me, this and that." He looks up and he sees us. Okay? Now, what can we learn from that? How can we apply that? I want to make 2 points. I think it's 2. Number one, first of all, complete immersion. So we can try as follows, that when you're studying Torah, try to remove distractions. Even it can be a couple of minutes, right? Even a couple of minutes where no one can reach you. Well, okay, except there's emergencies, but whatever. You turn off the internet chatter, you turn off things, and you just concentrate, right? That is so precious when you put that kind of focus into it. That's what he was a master of that. So that's another lesson is let's take some Torah learning and then so utterly immerse that we're just not distracted, even if for a couple moments. That would be big. But the other thing is, what was he learning? He was learning something that he's probably been over tens of thousands of times. But as we know, the Torah is not a newspaper. It's divine. It has divine depth. And the rabbis, the Talmud itself tells us that if you just learn a piece of Torah and just move on to the next piece, and you don't review, you have done the hard work, because sometimes Torah is complicated, of breaking the ground, but you didn't put the seeds in and you're not going to bear fruits, right? So think about this. Mishnayos is the most basic part of the oral law, and he's going over with such intensity, he doesn't even know people are there. So let's this year, again, let's reciprocate to Rav Chaim. Let's emulate him. Let him be the catalyst of our good deeds. So how about that? Let's review things that we've learned. Let's give credit to the divine depth there and go over what you've learned already. Last one, and we're done. It's very famous that, someone like this is operating at a very high level. He's handling very complex decisions of Torah and also welfare of people. He could be busy enough to really say, let me deal with the elites and let me just learn Torah. Let me just sit in this room and learn Torah. But no, he said hours. I think it was 2 hours, at least 1 hour a day, just to receive the public. Anyone. I heard one secular professor here in Israel say, we need someone like this who's willing to, someone on such a high level who's willing to take in and greet and spend time with anyone who needs them for any reason. So what we see from this is, as great a Torah scholar as he was, as important as his learning was to protect the world and bring blessing in the world, he set time for others. He closed the book and just was there for people. So we know how busy we get, and we certainly have to be prioritizing and thinking of our time, but we can never treat people like that. Look at what he did. Look at who he was and what he did. So I just want to review as follows, that we've discussed the mitzvahs that you get by listening to this class and the mitzvahs you get by trying to implement what he did. And I just want to, appeal to you. First of all, I encourage you to please pass this class around, because the more people who listen to the class, have in mind these mitzvahs, and try to emulate him, the more we get to reciprocate to someone who has given so much to us that we will never be able to fathom. So please, God, this should be an Aliyah's neshama, elevate his soul, and we should make the world a better place as a result of this man's contribution to us.
Shir Chadash,